They pushed a pen in my hand to steal my home, banking on my silence and old age. But with a 2-word note, I sprung a trap of my own, and the click of the bank's locked doors was the sound of their world ending. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. My son pushed the pen across the polished counter. Just sign, Mom. His voice was a low, urgent thing, a sound that didn't belong to him. Beside me, his wife Vanessa squeezed my shoulder, her painted nails digging into the thin fabric of my blouse. The pressure wasn't comforting. It was a threat. My gaze flickered past them to the young cashier. Her name tag read Sophia. Her eyes were dark and kind, and for a split second, they met mine with a flicker of concern. It was enough. While my son and his wife looked down at the document, a thick stack of papers designed to steal my life, I slipped the cashier a small folded note. My hand trembled, but my purpose was clear. The note held just 2 words. Help me. They were smiling for the security camera when the world changed. A sharp, definitive click echoed through the vast marble hall. The branch manager, a man I now know as Mr. Davies, had just locked the main doors. My name is Eleanor, and in my 78th year, my world had become a quiet, ordered peace. After my husband Robert passed, my life shrank to the size of my small garden, the pages of my books, and the weekly calls with my daughter Claire. It was a small world, but it was mine. I didn't realize it was also a territory, a set of assets on a balance sheet, until my son Michael and Vanessa began their campaign. It started subtly, gentle suggestions about my bookkeeping, casual remarks about rising property taxes, offers to simplify my accounts. I am not a fool, but I am a mother. I chose to believe in the goodness of my son, to see his concern as genuine, even as a cold knot of unease tightened in my stomach. The suggestions became demands. The visits became meetings, with Michael looking increasingly haggard and Vanessa's smiles growing brighter and more brittle. The morning they drove me to Riverwood National Bank was the culmination of weeks of this soft, suffocating pressure. The car smelled of Vanessa's perfume, an expensive, cloying scent that seemed to suck the air from my lungs. She insisted on driving, with me in the passenger seat and Michael in the back, a silent, miserable presence. The pop music she played on the radio was jarringly loud, a frantic, cheerful soundtrack to my mounting dread. "It's for the best, Eleanor," Vanessa said, reaching over to pat my knee. Her hand felt like a claw. "Once this is all sorted, you won't have to worry about a thing. Michael can handle everything for you." I looked at my reflection in the side window. A frail-looking old woman with frightened eyes stared back. Robert had always handled the finances. He had been meticulous, organized, and had left me more than secure. "Your mother is a smart woman, but let's make it easy for her," he used to say, showing me the neatly labeled files. I knew my accounts. I knew my worth. My supposed confusion was a fiction they had invented. Inside the bank, the air conditioning was a cold shock. The marble floors echoed with the brisk, businesslike clicks of people's shoes. Vanessa's hand was on my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, steering me directly to a cashier's window. Michael scurried ahead, carrying a thick leather briefcase. "We have an appointment," Vanessa announced to Sophia, her voice radiating a cheerful authority that brooked no argument. Sophia gave me that small, questioning smile. I tried to smile back, but my lips felt stiff. Michael opened the briefcase on the counter. The latches clicked open like cell doors shutting. He pulled out a thick stack of papers, at least 20 pages, filled with dense, incomprehensible legal jargon. He slid it in front of me, alongside a heavy, expensive-looking pen. "It's all just standard stuff, Mom," he said, his voice low and rushed. He wouldn't look at me, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. It just gives me the ability to manage your accounts, pay your bills from my end. It makes things easier. Just sign here and here." He pointed to two yellow tabs marked with an X. Vanessa's other hand came to rest on my shoulder. She leaned in close, her voice a sweet, poisonous whisper in my ear. "We don't want to make a scene, do we, Eleanor? Let's just get this done so we can take you for a nice lunch." Her fingers began to squeeze, a slow, insistent pressure that sent a sharp pain radiating down my arm. It was a private, deniable act of violence, a perfect metaphor for all their manipulations. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hand trembled as I reached for the pen. This was it. The moment I lost everything. But as my fingers brushed against the cool metal of the pen, they also brushed against the small, folded square of paper in my purse. I had written it last night, sitting at my kitchen table in the dark, the words scrawled by the light of the street lamp outside. It had felt like a foolish, melodramatic gesture then. Now, it felt like the only weapon I had left. My eyes met Sophia's over the top of the papers. I saw the question in her expression again. In that split second, I made my choice. "Oh, dear," I said, my voice a quavering, theatrical whisper. I let the pen drop from my fingers. It rolled across the counter. As Vanessa and Michael both instinctively looked down at it, my other hand shot out. I pressed the folded note into Sophia's hand, my fingers briefly closing over hers. She didn't flinch. Her hand simply closed over the note, and, in a single fluid motion, slid it out of sight beneath her counter. "There now, sweetheart." "Don't you worry," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false concern as she retrieved the pen. She smiled brightly towards the small black dome of the security camera on the ceiling. "We're right here to help you." Michael forced a pained smile for the camera as well. They were the perfect, caring family. Sophia cleared her throat. I need to get my manager to witness the signature due to the nature of the document," she said, her voice impressively calm. "One moment." She stepped away from her window. I held my breath. Had she read it? Would she do anything? A moment later, a man in a sharp suit was walking towards us. He was in his late 50s with a calm, professional air. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Mr. Davies, the branch manager. Sophia said you needed some assistance." "My mother is just signing some papers to allow me to help with her estate," Michael explained, the lie sounding thin and rehearsed. "Of course," Mr. Davies said, his eyes not on Michael, but on me. He gave me a brief, steady look. "We just need to make sure everything is in order. Bank policy." He spoke with a practiced, reassuring calm, and as he did, I heard it. A sound that was both quiet and earth-shattering. The sharp, definitive click of the bank's magnetic locks engaging. A soft whirring sound as the mechanism sealed the heavy glass doors. The low, ambient hum of the bank seemed to fall away into a sudden, shocked silence. The world seemed to hold its breath. Michael and Vanessa froze, their fake smiles plastered on their faces. They had walked me into a trap, but it was the doors of their own cage that had just been locked. The friendly smile on Vanessa's face didn't just fade. It dropped like a mask, revealing the hard, contemptuous lines of her true expression beneath. Her eyes, which had been crinkled in a performance of affection, narrowed into sharp, suspicious slits. She looked from the sealed glass doors to the impassive face of Mr. Davies and then, with dawning horror, to me. Her voice was a low, venomous sound meant only for my ears. "What did you do?" The silence after the lock clicked shut was thick and heavy. Vanessa's fingers, which had momentarily relaxed on my shoulder, tightened again, this time with a punishing, angry force. The performance was over. Michael, by contrast, seemed to shrink. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, clammy pallor. He licked his lips nervously and took a half step towards the manager, his hands held up in a gesture of placating surrender. "Sir, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice an octave higher than usual. "It's just a standard security drill, right? If you could just let us know when it's over. We have a lunch reservation." Mr. Davies regarded my son with a cool, unreadable expression. "Yes, you could call it a security drill," he said, his voice smooth and utterly in command. "Bank protocol for a potential Code 9 situation. We're just ensuring the safety and security of our clients. It shouldn't take long to resolve." Code 9. The term sounded official, vaguely menacing. It meant nothing to me, but I saw from the look on Michael's face that it was not a term one wanted to be associated with. He looked like he was about to be sick. The manager's calm, procedural tone was more intimidating than any shouting could have been. He had taken their power away with a single, quiet action. The other customers in the bank had started to notice that something was amiss. Conversations had stopped. People were looking over at us, a small knot of drama unfolding in the center of the vast marble hall. I was no longer an invisible old woman. I was the epicenter of a public spectacle. "If you'll please come with me," Mr. Davies said, his tone making it clear this was not a request. He gestured with an open hand towards a glass-walled office that stood in the center of the bank floor like a fishbowl. "We can sort this out in the privacy of my office." The walk to that office was the longest of my life. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on us. Vanessa's hand was still on my arm, but her grip was now less about intimidation and more about preventing me from bolting, holding me as a hostage to her own failing plan. I could feel the furious, vibrating tension in her body. Michael trailed behind us, looking like a schoolboy being marched to the principal's office. I felt a dizzying, terrifying cocktail of emotions. I was frightened of what was to come, of Vanessa's inevitable rage. But beneath the fear, there was a small, unfamiliar flicker of something else. Power. For weeks I had been a passive victim in their quiet domestic campaign of coercion. Now, with one small, desperate act, I had moved the battle from the privacy of my home to this public, regulated space. The office was exactly as it appeared from the outside, a cage of glass. Mr. Davies held the door for me, and I stepped inside, my legs feeling unsteady. Michael and Vanessa followed. The manager closed the door behind us, the soft click muffling the ambient sounds of the bank. We were separated from the world, yet on full display to it. Mr. Davies sat behind his large, tidy desk and looked at us, his expression calm and unreadable. "Mr. and Mrs. Brooks," he said, his gaze fixed on Michael and Vanessa. "I'm going to need you to wait outside for a few moments. Please have a seat in the chairs just outside the door. I need to speak with your mother alone." "Now wait a minute," Vanessa started, her voice sharp with indignation. "She's confused. We are her legal—" "You are not her legal anything," Mr. Davies interrupted, his voice still quiet, but now edged with steel. He gestured to the papers on his desk. "This document, which is not yet signed, is a power of attorney. Until it is legally executed, you have no more legal standing in this matter than I do. In fact, as her banker of 27 years, I likely have a more established fiduciary responsibility. Please, wait outside." The cool, factual dismissal left Vanessa speechless. She shot me a look of pure venom before turning on her heel and stalking out of the office. Michael, looking utterly defeated, mumbled a weak apology and followed her, closing the door behind him. Through the glass, I watched them. It was a surreal experience, seeing my son and his wife as outsiders. Their frantic, whispered argument was a silent movie playing out for my benefit. Vanessa was rigid with fury, her hands gesturing wildly. Michael was a mess. His shoulders slumped, running his hands through his already disheveled hair. He looked trapped, and I realized with a pang of sorrow that he had been for a very long time, caught between his conscience and his wife's ambition. Suddenly, Vanessa lunged for the office door handle. It didn't budge. She rattled it, then banged her fist on the glass, her face contorted in a snarl. A security guard started moving toward her. Mr. Davies simply looked at her, then back at me, his expression unchanged. Defeated, she retreated to her chair, her fury now a low, simmering burn. Mr. Davies turned his full attention to me. He swiveled his chair so that he was facing me directly, creating a small private space between us. "Eleanor," he said, using my first name for the first time in all the years I had banked here. His voice was gentle. "Take a deep breath. You are safe here. Can you tell me what happened? In your own words." The simple act of being asked for my own story was enough to break the dam of fear I had been holding back for weeks. The words came in a quiet, shaky torrent. I told him everything, the subtle pressure, the way they made me feel foolish and forgetful. I told him about their mounting financial troubles, which they spoke of in hushed, urgent tones when they thought I couldn't hear. I pulled out my phone and showed him a text from Vanessa from the night before. "Don't make this difficult tomorrow, Eleanor. You owe us this." His eyes narrowed as he read it. I told him about the documents, admitting I didn't understand the legal language, but that I knew in my gut it was wrong. I told him about Vanessa's hand on my shoulder, about the fear of saying no. "I was so scared," I whispered, my voice cracking. I didn't know who to turn to. He listened without interruption. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply listened, and in doing so, he gave me the greatest gift he possibly could. He believed me. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You did the right thing, Eleanor. Passing that note took a great deal of courage." He picked up the receiver of his desk phone. "I need to make a phone call now. It's bank protocol. I'm going to contact our corporate security and fraud department. They have a direct liaison with the local police who specialize in these matters. It's all very discreet, but I want to be clear. This is no longer just a family dispute. You are alleging coercion, which is a serious crime." I watched as he made the call, his voice low and professional, relaying the essential facts. My mind was a whirlwind, a crime, the police. It all felt so unreal. I looked out through the glass at my son, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose report cards I had treasured. He was now on the other side of a wall of glass, about to be embroiled in a criminal investigation that I had initiated. Beneath my fear, a sharp, bitter wave of grief washed over me. No matter what happened next, my family as I had known it was broken forever. The wait was an eternity. Through the glass doors of the bank, I saw the flashing lights of a patrol car pull up to the curb, painting the street in silent strokes of red and blue. The sound of a radio crackled, a staticky promise of the authority that was about to step into our lives. The arrival of the police was not the loud, siren-blaring affair I might have imagined. It was quiet, efficient, and deeply intimidating. 2 uniformed officers entered, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere of the bank from one of awkward tension to one of serious official gravity. One was a large, stoic-looking man. The other was a woman in her 40s with a calm, intelligent face and a compassionate but no-nonsense air about her. She was the one who approached the office. Mr. Davies met her at the door. "Officer Miller," he said with a nod of recognition. "Mr. Davies," she replied, her gaze sweeping over the scene, taking in Michael and Vanessa, and then resting on me. "Let's see what we have here." She entered the office and introduced herself, her voice gentle. "Ma'am, My name is Officer Miller. I'm here to help. I understand you're in a very difficult situation. Her kindness was a small island of comfort in a sea of turmoil. She asked me a few brief, clarifying questions, her manner reassuring and professional. Then she turned her attention to the couple sitting outside. The power dynamic shifted again, decisively. Mark and Vanessa were no longer dealing with a bank manager. They were dealing with law enforcement. Officer Miller's partner took Michael to one side of the bank near the teller windows, while she herself approached Vanessa. I watched from the safety of the office as she began her questioning. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the scene play out with devastating clarity. Vanessa, who had been so confident, suddenly looked small and defensive. Her attempts at charming the officer were met with a blank, professional stare. Her rehearsed story about my confusion was clearly not working. Across the bank floor, Michael was crumbling under the quiet, persistent questions from the other officer. His hands were shaking. He kept looking over at Vanessa as if for guidance, but she was trapped in her own interrogation. Their united front, so carefully constructed, had been shattered by the simple act of separating them. While they were occupied, Mr. Davies slid the power of attorney document across the desk to me. His finger rested on a specific paragraph. I saw this while you were talking, Eleanor. I want you to see it too. My eyes scanned the dense text. It was a clause authorizing the immediate liquidation of any and all trust funds held in my name, with the proceeds to be transferred to a jointly held account with Michael. That's the educational trust for your grandchildren, Leo and Grace, isn't it? He asked quietly. The breath left my body. That trust was sacred. Robert and I had started it when the children were born. It was our legacy to them, a guarantee of their future. The thought that Michael would be willing to steal from his own children was a betrayal so profound it almost defied comprehension. It wasn't just my life they were after. It was the future of my grandchildren. The world tilted and then solidified into a hard, cold resolve. This was no longer just about me. After their initial questioning, it was clear to the officers there was cause for a formal investigation. Eleanor, Officer Miller said, kneeling before me in the manager's office. We're going to get you home and make sure you're safe. We can't let you go home with your son today. Do you understand? I nodded, a fresh wave of grief washing over me. The simple fabric of my life was being irrevocably rewoven. What will happen to them? I whispered. For now, they'll be taken to the station for a more formal interview, she explained. They are not under arrest at this time, but they are persons of interest in a potential felony investigation. I sat in the passenger seat of Officer Miller's patrol car, the quiet hum of the engine a world away from the frantic pop music Vanessa had played just hours before. The familiar suburban streets of my neighborhood looked alien. When we arrived at my house, another police car was already there, and a man in a jumpsuit was standing on my porch. We've called a locksmith, ma'am, Officer Miller explained. With your permission, we'd like to change the locks on all your doors. It's a precaution. I gave my permission, feeling like a stranger at my own front door. I watched as the old lock, the one my husband Robert had installed 30 years ago, was drilled out and replaced with a new, shiny brass one. It was a necessary violation, a symbolic act of reclaiming my space. Inside, Officer Miller helped me get an emergency protective order. There was no trip to a courthouse, no long wait. She used her laptop to connect with an on-call judge. I saw his face on the small screen, tired but attentive. I answered his questions, my voice shaking. 20 minutes later, it was done. A legal document now existed that barred Michael and Vanessa from coming within 100 yards of me, my home, or my car. It was a shield, a piece of paper that held the force of law, but it felt like a declaration of war against my own child. After the locksmith and the other officer had left, Officer Miller made me a cup of tea. She sat with me at my kitchen table, the same table where Michael and Vanessa had laid out their plans. "The hardest part for many people in your situation, Eleanor," she said, her voice full of a wisdom born from experience, "is the guilt. You might feel like you've betrayed them, but you need to remember they made their choices. You just made the choice to protect yourself." After she left, the silence in the house was immense. It was no longer the tense, watchful silence of waiting for their next visit. It was a new kind of silence, peaceful, but also profoundly lonely. That night, my phone rang. It was Michael, a clear violation of the order he'd been served less than 3 hours ago. A foolish, motherly part of me hoped it was a call of apology. I was wrong. "Mom," he began, his voice thick with tears. It was a sound he had used as a boy to get his way. "You have to stop this. You have to call the police and tell them it was all a misunderstanding." "I can't do that, Michael," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You know it wasn't." "But you don't understand," he cried, his voice rising in desperation. "Vanessa, she says they're going to press charges, that we'll lose the house. She says, if I go to jail—" He sobbed, a raw, ugly sound. "She says you'll never see Leo and Grace again." The threat hung in the air, a physical blow. My grandchildren, my sweet, innocent grandchildren. I pictured their faces, their laughter. "They miss you, Mom," he sobbed. "You're their grandmother. Please don't do this to them. Don't tear this family apart." He hung up. I stood there shaking, his words a toxic poison seeping into my heart. He had used my deepest love as a weapon against me. The line clicked dead, leaving only a dial tone and the sudden, terrible understanding of the battle that was to come. Alone in the crushing silence of my house, his threat echoed. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the phone. I called my daughter, Claire. She lived in Oregon, a world away, but she was my rock. I told her everything, my voice breaking as I recounted the events at the bank, the changed locks, the protective order, and finally, Michael's poisonous phone call. She was silent for a long moment. Then I heard her take a sharp, furious breath. "That woman," Claire said, her voice a low growl of protective rage. "I knew she was a snake from the day Michael brought her home. Mom, I'm booking a flight. I'll be there tomorrow." Before she could arrive, the fallout began to rain down. Vanessa, true to form, didn't wait. She launched her next attack, not with lawyers, but with whispers. She called Mrs. Gable, the head of my church's prayer circle, a woman I'd known for 30 years. Vanessa's voice, I could imagine, was thick with feigned concern. She spun a masterful tale of a mother in sudden, tragic decline. "I'm so worried about Eleanor," she would have said. "She's been so confused lately, paranoid. She thinks Michael and I are trying to harm her. Now her other daughter, Claire, is flying in, and, well, Claire has always been a bit materialistic. We're just terrified she's going to take advantage of Mom in her vulnerable state." The phone rang that afternoon. It was Mrs. Gable. "Eleanor, dear," she began, her voice oozing sympathy. "Vanessa called me. Oh, I am so sorry for what you're going through. We are all praying for you. Is there anything we can do? Perhaps help you find some resources for memory care." The question was a gentle stab, wrapped in Christian charity. They weren't praying for my protection. They were praying for my supposed senility. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My own community, the one that was supposed to be my support, was being turned against me. The isolation was a physical weight. Claire arrived the next day like a force of nature. She swept into the house, her suitcase hitting the floor with a thud, and immediately took charge. She was my husband's daughter, all clear-headed pragmatism and fierce loyalty. She listened to the story about Mrs. Gable, her eyes turning to chips of ice. "All right," she said, pulling out her laptop. "Phase 1 is containment." She spent the next hour on the phone, first with the phone company, blocking Michael and Vanessa's numbers, then with a lawyer she found online, a specialist in elder abuse. She acted as a fierce, unreachable wall between me and the world. Her first phone call with Michael was a blistering, ugly affair. I could hear her voice from the other room, low and furious. "Don't you dare try to blame Vanessa for this, Michael. You stood there. You held the pen. You let her do this to our mother. You are a grown man, and you made a choice. And threatening Mom with her own grandchildren? You're lower than I ever thought possible." The call ended with Claire telling him in no uncertain terms that she would be his only point of contact from now on. The line between my children had been drawn in stone. That evening, Claire started going through my mail, which had piled up over the past few weeks of chaos. She was sorting bills from junk mail when she suddenly stopped. "Mom, what's this?" She held up a letter from a credit card company I didn't recognize. It was a past due notice, a very large one. "I've never had a card with them," I said, confused. Claire tore it open. Her face went pale as she read it. "Mom, this is a platinum card. It was opened 6 months ago, in your name. The balance is almost maxed out." We looked at each other, the same sick realization dawning on us. It wasn't just a plan for the future. They had already started. The forgery wasn't just a possibility, it was a hard, documented fact. This was the proof. This was the pattern of criminal intent. As we were processing this new violation, the doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was a man holding a large floral arrangement. "Delivery for Eleanor Brooks," he said cheerfully. Claire took the enormous bouquet of lilies. "Who are they from?" she asked. The delivery man shrugged. "No card, ma'am." Lilies. My least favorite flower. The funereal, cloying scent filled the entryway. Vanessa knew this. It wasn't a peace offering. It was a message. It was a threat disguised as a sympathy arrangement, a public performance of her role as the concerned daughter-in-law. It was a declaration that even with a protective order, she could still reach me. Claire's hands were shaking with rage. She picked up the vase, marched to the back door, and threw the entire arrangement into the compost bin. That night, a courier arrived. He handed Claire a thick legal envelope. She signed for it, her face grim, and closed the door. The weight of the packet in her hands felt ominous. She opened it under the kitchen light. Her face hardened as she read, the pages trembling slightly. She finally looked up at me, her eyes dark with a new kind of fear. "They filed a petition with the court," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're asking for an emergency hearing to have you declared mentally incompetent." The documents were a work of pure, malicious fiction. Page after page painted a picture of me as a confused, paranoid old woman suffering from the advanced stages of dementia. The petition alleged that I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs and was being unduly influenced by my favorite child, Claire, who, it claimed, was systematically alienating me from my devoted son, Michael, in order to seize control of my estate for herself. It was a brilliant, twisted strategy. It took the very real situation of my son's betrayal and flipped it on its head, recasting him as the victim and me as the unstable, manipulated puppet. To support these claims, they had attached evidence. There were edited audio clips from old voicemail messages, snippets of conversations where I sounded tired or momentarily forgetful, skillfully stitched together to create a narrative of cognitive decline. Even more cruelly, They had managed to get statements from two of my neighbors, including Mrs. Gable from the church. I could imagine Vanessa, in the weeks leading up to the bank incident, paying them special attention, stopping by with a warm smile and a basket of muffins, planting seeds of concern. Eleanor seems so scattered lately, don't you think? I'm so worried about her. In the cold legal language of the court filing, their mild observations were magnified into proof of my senility. The petition demanded an immediate competency hearing and the appointment of a court-mandated guardian to oversee my affairs. That guardian, they audaciously suggested, should be a neutral third party, approved by their firm. "She's trying to take away your voice," Claire said, her voice shaking with a rage so profound it was almost silent. "If she can get you declared incompetent, then your testimony against her is worthless. She can claim you were confused, that you imagined the whole thing at the bank. She's not just trying to get your money, Mom. She's trying to erase you." The psychological toll of this new attack was immense. It was one thing to be accused of being a bad mother. It was another to have my very sanity, my perception of reality, put on trial. I began to second-guess myself. Had I forgotten a conversation? Did I sound confused on the phone? Vanessa's poison was insidious. It made me question my own mind, just as she had been trying to do for months. Claire saw the doubt creeping into my eyes. "No," she said firmly, taking my hands. "Don't you let her do this. You are the sanest person I know. This is a tactic. It's a desperate, ugly move, and we are going to fight it." The next morning, I did something Claire didn't expect. While she was on the phone with our new lawyer, I walked out the front door and across the street to the house of the other neighbor who had signed an affidavit, Mr. Henderson, an elderly man who was himself quite forgetful. He was watering his petunias. "Arthur," I said, my voice steady, "I need to ask you something." He looked up, startled. "Eleanor, good to see you out and about." "You signed a paper for Vanessa," I said, not accusingly, but as a statement of fact. "It said you were concerned about my mental state. I want to know what you told her." He had the grace to look ashamed. He set down his watering can. "Well, she came by. She was so worried about you. She said you'd missed a couple of your appointments and that you seemed distant. She asked if I'd noticed anything. I told her you'd seemed a bit tired lately. That's all. She said the paper was just something for the doctor, to get you a checkup. She's using it in court to try and have me declared incompetent, Arthur." The color drained from his face. "Oh, my lord. Eleanor, I had no idea. That nice young woman. She seemed so sincere." I had my answer. It wasn't malice on his part, just manipulation. But it showed me the battlefield. Vanessa wasn't just fighting me. She was poisoning the world around me. We met with our lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Ms. Albright, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s. She reviewed the petition, her expression grim. "This is a classic Darvo tactic," she said. "Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. They are the aggressors, so they paint you as the aggressor and themselves as the victims. It's textbook." She looked at the evidence of the forged credit card. "This is our smoking gun for the criminal case," she said. "But right now, we have to focus on the competency hearing. It's a separate battle, and it comes first. They are trying to discredit you as a witness before you can even testify about this." We spent the next few days preparing. Ms. Albright drilled me with questions, preparing me for the cross-examination. We gathered my own evidence. Financial records showing my perfect history of paying bills, statements from my doctor confirming my sound health, and even a statement from a flustered Arthur Henderson, recanting his previous affidavit and explaining how he had been misled. The police were also quietly bearing fruit. Officer Miller called Claire. They had executed a search warrant for Michael and Vanessa's financial records. They found a story of staggering incompetence and desperate deceit. The high-end interior design business Vanessa had started with a loan from a shady online lender had been a catastrophic failure. They were on the verge of foreclosure, trapped in a debt spiral. My assets weren't just a windfall, they were their only way out. This proved their motive beyond any doubt. It was a cold comfort. The legal system moves at a glacial pace. The competency hearing was scheduled first. Before I could be a witness against them, I first had to prove to the court that I was a reliable narrator of my own life. The night before the hearing, Ms. Albright called. Her voice was tight. "I have some bad news. Vanessa's lawyer has just filed a motion. It's been granted." "What is it?" Claire asked, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. "She successfully petitioned to have the children present at the courthouse tomorrow," Ms. Albright said. "She's claiming it's their right to be near their father during this trying time. But we all know what it is. It's theater. She's going to use your grandchildren as props." The day of the competency hearing was the day I had been dreading most. It felt like the ultimate violation, a public trial of my own mind. I sat in the sterile, imposing courtroom, a place that felt a universe away from my quiet life, and listened as a lawyer I had never met, a man hired by my son's wife, stood before a judge and methodically attempted to dismantle my reality. He presented the edited audio clips, my own voice sounding tired and disjointed, a caricature of senility. He read the statements from my neighbors, their mundane observations twisted into a diagnosis of my decline. He painted a picture of me as a confused, vulnerable old woman, easily swayed by my scheming daughter, Claire. I sat there, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, feeling a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a play about someone else's life. During a brief recess, I saw them. My grandchildren, Leo and Grace, were in the hallway. Vanessa had brought them, just as Ms. Albright had warned. It was a calculated, cruel piece of theater. They looked lost and frightened in the cavernous, somber courthouse. They waved timidly at me, and my heart broke all over again. Vanessa stood behind them, a hand on each of their shoulders, her face a mask of sorrowful concern for the cameras and the public. She was using them as props, as silent, emotional blackmail. My lawyer, Ms. Albright, was brilliant. She called Mr. Davies from the bank to the stand first. He was a rock. He described the events at the bank with calm, factual clarity. He spoke of my courage, my lucidity, and the clear coercion he had witnessed. "In my 30 years as a banker," he said, looking directly at the judge, "I have learned to recognize financial elder abuse. What I saw that day was a textbook example." Finally, it was my turn. My legs felt weak as I walked to the witness box. But as I sat down and looked out at the room, a strange calm settled over me. I saw Claire, her face radiating a fierce, unconditional support. I saw Mr. Davies, who had come to be a silent witness on my behalf. And I saw Michael and Vanessa at their table. Vanessa was whispering instructions to her lawyer, her face a mask of cold confidence. Michael, however, looked ill. He was pale and sweating, and he couldn't bring himself to look at me. Vanessa's lawyer approached me, his smile a predatory, condescending thing. "Mrs. Brooks?" he began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Let's talk about your finances. It's a lot to keep track of at your age, isn't it? The bills, the investments. It can be quite overwhelming." "I manage," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I expected. "But wouldn't you agree that it would be easier if your loving son Michael were to help you with these complex matters?" "My son Michael tried to have me sign away control of my entire life," I replied, my gaze steady. "That is not what I would call help." He tried to trip me up, asking me rapid-fire questions about specific dates, old bank statements, and past conversations. He was trying to create the confusion he had claimed already existed. But I found a strength I didn't know I possessed. I answered each question calmly, simply, and truthfully. I was not a confused old woman. I was a mother who had been betrayed, and I would not let them erase my voice. During the lunch recess, as we sat in a small conference room, Claire's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "My name is Sarah. I used to work for Vanessa Brooks. I heard what she's doing to her mother-in-law. There's something you should know. Call me." Claire's eyes widened. She immediately stepped into the hallway to make the call. She came back a few minutes later, her face grim but alight with a new fire. "That was a former bookkeeper for Vanessa's design business," she whispered. "She quit 2 months ago. She said Vanessa used to brag about how she was going to solve their money problems by getting control of your estate. She called it Operation Inheritance. Sarah is willing to testify. It was a crack in their armor, a witness from inside their own camp." Ms. Albright immediately went to work, preparing a motion to have Sarah testify. The afternoon session was about to begin. The turning point was at hand. Vanessa's lawyer, unaware of this development, made his biggest mistake. He called Michael to the stand, intending for him to corroborate their story of my decline. As my son walked past me, his face was ashen. He took the stand, was sworn in, and sat down, his eyes fixed on the wooden railing in front of him, refusing to look at me, at his wife, at anyone. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. The air in the courtroom was thick with a tense, expectant silence. Michael sat in the witness box, a man visibly at war with himself. Vanessa's lawyer approached him with a confident smile. "Mr. Brooks," he began, his voice smooth and practiced, "you've been concerned about your mother's cognitive state for some time, haven't you?" Michael was silent for a long moment. I could see the internal battle raging in his face. His jaw worked, his hands clenched and unclenched on his knees. He was at a crossroads, a final, terrible choice laid bare before him. On one side was his wife, her eyes boring into him with a look of cold command. On the other was me, his mother. "Mr. Brooks?" the lawyer prompted, a note of irritation in his voice. Michael finally looked up. He didn't look at the lawyer. He didn't look at Vanessa. He looked at me. And in his eyes I saw not a villain, but my son, my lost, broken, and deeply ashamed son. The lie, it seemed, was one he could no longer bear to tell. "No," he said, his voice cracking, the single word echoing in the silent courtroom. "No, my mother is as sharp as a tack. She always has been." A shocked murmur went through the room. Vanessa stiffened as if struck, her face a mask of disbelief and pure fury. Her lawyer looked stunned, his confident smile vanishing. Michael's composure crumbled completely. He turned to the judge, his eyes filling with tears. I did a terrible thing," he stammered. "We were in trouble financially. Vanessa. She came up with the plan to get power of attorney. I knew it was wrong, but I was weak. I was a coward. I went along with it. We tried to force her to sign papers she didn't want to sign." He took a ragged breath and finally locked his gaze on me. "But I will not sit here and lie about my mother's mind. I will not do that. She is not the one who is sick. I am." His confession, so raw and so complete, hung in the air, a devastating, irrefutable truth. The carefully constructed artifice of Vanessa's case had been obliterated, not by a lawyer, but by the one thing she had never counted on, the last tattered remnant of her husband's conscience. The courtroom erupted into chaos. The judge banged her gavel, calling for order. Vanessa's lawyer, pale and flustered, tried to retract his witness, but the damage was done. The competency petition was not just dismissed. It was thrown out with a scathing rebuke from the judge, who made it clear she viewed the entire motion as a malicious and fraudulent abuse of the legal process. The house of cards Vanessa had so carefully constructed had been brought down by the one person she thought she controlled completely. In the aftermath, the legal system, which had seemed so slow and indifferent, moved with a sudden, decisive speed. In the hallway outside the courtroom, as we were surrounded by a comforting circle of Claire, Miss Albright, and Mr. Davies, Officer Miller approached. She wasn't alone. "Vanessa Brooks," she said, her voice calm and official. "You are under arrest for attempted grand theft, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Vanessa didn't scream or cry. Her face was a mask of cold, silent fury. As Officer Miller led her away in handcuffs, she turned her head and looked back at me. Her eyes were filled with a chilling, unadulterated hatred. Her lips formed two silent words: "It's not over." The sight of my son's wife being arrested in the courthouse hallway was a surreal public spectacle. Michael stood alone, abandoned by her lawyer, weeping openly. He had done the right thing, finally, but it had cost him everything. He was a broken man, caught in the wreckage of his own weakness. For his cooperation, the district attorney would eventually offer him a plea deal, probation, and mandatory community service instead of jail time. It was a mercy he perhaps didn't deserve, but one I was quietly grateful for. The thought of both my son and his wife in prison was a tragedy I could barely comprehend. We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright sunlight. I was free. My mind was my own. My life was my own. But I felt no triumph, only a profound, hollow ache. The war was over, but the battlefield was my own family, and the casualties were everywhere. The weeks following the hearing were a blur of legal procedure. The emergency protective order was made permanent by a judge who had read the transcripts from the competency hearing. Signing the final document felt like closing a heavy door. A family court, in a separate and swift ruling, assigned a mediator to handle all communication regarding my grandchildren. All visits were to be supervised by Claire, ensuring that Leo and Grace could never again be used as pawns. My life was returned to me, piece by painful piece. The first supervised visit was at a neutral location, a sunny park with a playground. Leo and Grace were quiet, their young minds unable to grasp the full scope of what their parents had done. They knew their mother was away and their father was in trouble. It was awkward and sad, a fragile bridge being built over a chasm. But children are resilient. Under Claire's gentle guidance and my steady, unconditional love, the awkwardness began to fade, replaced by the familiar, easy affection we had once shared. Michael's first letter arrived a week after the hearing. It was addressed in his familiar, slightly sloppy handwriting. I recognized it with a jolt that was equal parts anger and a deep maternal sorrow. I did not open it. I could not. I put it in a small wooden box on my mantelpiece, the one where I kept old, important papers. Another letter came a few weeks later, and another after that. The box began to fill, a silent testament to the wound that remained. Vanessa, out on bail while awaiting trial, was not silent. Her final, vicious counterattack was not a legal maneuver, but an act of petty, personal cruelty. My garden was my sanctuary, the place where I felt closest to Robert. Every year, I participated in the neighborhood's community garden tour, a small point of pride. The night before the tour, Vanessa enacted her revenge. I woke up to a scene of devastation. My prize-winning rose bushes, the ones Robert had planted, had been hacked to pieces. The tomato plants were uprooted and thrown across the lawn. The carefully tended flower beds were trampled, the soil salted. It was an act of pure malice, an attack not just on my property, but on my peace, on my husband's memory. Claire was incandescent with rage. She called the police immediately, but I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. This was Vanessa's last desperate move, the tantrum of a cornered animal. I would not let her win. I would not let her make me hide in shame. That morning, for the garden tour, I did not withdraw. I did not close my gates. Instead, I placed a simple, handwritten sign at the front of the destroyed garden. It read, "Sometimes things are broken by forces outside of our control, but new things can always grow. Welcome to my garden of resilience." My neighbors, who had heard the whispers and seen the drama, now saw the truth. They came not to judge my ruined flowers, but to stand with me. Mrs. Gable from the church arrived with tears in her eyes and an apology on her lips. Arthur Henderson brought a tray of new seedlings. Others came with bags of fresh soil, with tools, with offers of help. They saw the vandalism for what it was, the final ugly signature of a bully. Vanessa's act of shame had been transformed into a moment of public solidarity. My community, which she had tried to poison, was rallying around me. That afternoon, Officer Miller called. "Eleanor, I think we've got her," she said. "Your next-door neighbor has a new security camera. It caught a car pulling up around 2 a.m. The driver stayed in the car, but we got a clear shot of the person who got out and went into your yard, and we have the license plate." She paused. "Vanessa has a court date tomorrow. I think this might just seal her fate." 6 months later, the legal storm has passed. Vanessa was convicted. The security camera footage of her accomplice, combined with Michael's testimony and the mountain of financial evidence, was overwhelming. She is now serving a short prison sentence. The financial wounds are healing, slowly. My life has settled into a new, quiet rhythm. The house is mine again, a true sanctuary. The silence is no longer heavy with ghosts, but filled with the sounds of life. Claire stayed with me for another month, helping me navigate the bewildering aftermath, and now calls every day. The garden, once a scene of devastation, is being replanted, a collaborative project with the neighbors who stood by me. The new rose bushes are small, but they are strong. My relationship with my grandchildren is the most delicate part of the mending. The supervised visits have given way to regular weekends at my house. We bake cookies. We work in the garden. We are building a new kind of family, one step at a time, founded on the hard-won ground of truth and unconditional love. The relationship with my son Michael is the great unresolved wound in my heart. He is legally forbidden from contacting me directly, a restriction that feels both like a necessary shield and a profound, unnatural tragedy. Clara tells me he is in therapy. He is working a menial job to start paying off his debts. He is trying, in his own broken way, to take responsibility for his life. The letters kept coming, a steady, one-sided correspondence with a mother he could no longer speak to. The box on the mantelpiece is now full of its unopened companions. The final scene of my long, arduous story unfolds not in a courtroom or a bank, but here, in the quiet solitude of my own garden. It is late spring. The new roses are in bloom. I am sitting on my back porch, a cup of tea growing cold beside me. The mail has just come, and with it, another letter from Michael. It sits on the small table in front of me, his familiar handwriting a silent, persistent question. My grandchildren are coming to visit this afternoon. Claire will bring them. We are going to plant new tomato seedlings in the patch of earth that has been turned and healed. Life is moving forward. The future is no longer a landscape of fear, but one of quiet, simple possibilities. I look at the letter. I think of the son who betrayed me, the coward who finally found the courage to tell the truth. I think of the long, painful road of forgiveness, a road I am not yet sure I am ready to walk. But for the first time in a long, long time, the choice is entirely, completely mine. I am no longer a victim being steered and coerced. I am the matriarch of my own life, the keeper of my own peace. I don't open the letter, I leave it on the table. Instead, I pick up my garden trowel. I hear the sound of Claire's car in the driveway, the happy shouts of Leo and Grace. I stand up and walk towards the sound, towards the future. I go to my grandchildren, my hands ready to dig into the rich, dark earth, ready to plant something new. I have my story back, and I alone will decide how the next chapter is written. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.